in life, luck is always underrated and skill is overrated. More often than not, it's a package.
लायनल मेसी क्या बोलता है कि 10 years of it took 10 years of hard work for me to become an overnight success.
Correct.
So I believe that is important to have.
100%.
Yeah.
So my biggest learning from that mistake was that I think we also probably chose an industry and a business which was not fundamentally as good, but we got enamored because it was coming at a great value. So कई बार वो value दिखता है compelling, but वो actually value trap होता है.
Yeah. Does authenticity really sell?
I think it really does. I truly believe in it because
Welcome back to Game Room, everybody. Today we have Nishant Sharma with us. He's a founder and co-founder and CIO of Kedara Capital, which is one of the India's leading homegrown growth and buyout private equity fund. Thanks a lot, Nishant, for
having me here.
Thank you. So Nishant, I'll let you introduce Kedara in terms of what you guys do. You guys are very renowned point, but maybe for people who don't know
Sure.
what you guys have done, and then maybe we'll take it from there.
Sure. No, first of all, thanks for having me here. Naveen, delighted to be here. And Kedara is a teenager in human lifespan terms. I mean, we started 13 years ago in 2012. And as you said, we're a homegrown firm. The three of us who started it, myself, Sunish, Manish, we were all colleagues back in McKinsey. And, we left the firm around the same time. And as luck would have it, our paths also converged. We ended up being in private equity and then started Kedara in 2012. And today we manage a little over 6 billion in AUM across 4 funds. We have a team which is 75 people strong, all predominantly in Bombay and in GIFT City. We've invested a little over 3 billion, in India, returned about 2 billion back to our LPs. So we've been fortunate to have built a really, strong, inclusive, ownership-oriented culture, which has helped us, achieve some of these milestones. So really, grateful for where we are. But the aspiration is always, as you achieve certain milestones, to aim for bigger, milestones. So that's where we are.
Sure, great. So Nishant, I mean, before I get into the business and everything else, would love to understand, and I'll tell you later in terms of why I want to get into it all as well. Would love to understand a little bit more about Nishant in terms of where you come from, your family background, how was your childhood like, what were your aspirations, fears, etc.
Sure. No, again, great question. Sometimes we don't reflect enough on where we have come from, and that subconsciously plays a part in where we've come to so far, right? So I actually grew up in Delhi. I come, from a middle class family. I grew up in a place called Janakpuri in Delhi. Both my parents are teachers. My dad was a Hindi and Sanskrit teacher, and mom was a primary school teacher. So she was an all-rounder, as I call it, at school and also at work, because she was at home, because she was obviously managing her family duties as much as, her work duties. I had 3 sisters, older sisters, and it's funny because I'm the youngest. My oldest sister is 12 years older, then the middle one is 10 years older, and the third one is 6 years older. So in some ways, people tease my mom that it was your quest for a son. So I have to thank my mom and my 3 sisters, because if we had a boy in between, then I probably wouldn't be sitting here today.
True.
So it's one of those funny stories. But because of that, I think there's a lot of grounding in just, values that I got from my father and my mother. My father in particular, selflessness, was completely, in Hindi, as they say, vinamra, and that's something which subconsciously is sort of, I think I've inherited. And from my mom, it's been about resilience, right? Managing, family, work, juggling various things, just been incredibly inspiring for all of us, all 4 of us. But, I really, those are 2 things which have really, benefited me. But more importantly, I think the childhood was a lot of fun because good student, wasn't like, some rocket scientist, but a good student. And therefore I could do well in my academics, but also get the opportunity to play. So I would play every sport, extended family in different parts. So spend time with extended family, on summer breaks and, go to my Mausi and my mamas and my cousins. One of them had, farms in Jagadri. So we'd go there, mango orchards and so on. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, I really, when I look back at my childhood, I feel grateful for, all the different experiences that I had thanks to family and friends. I was also at the same time somewhat of a shy, reserved, underconfident kid. I could barely speak fluent English. Right now, it feels like I've always spoken fluent English, but that wasn't the case back in the day. As I grew up, and put a lot of effort, I think it became more polished. But I think at all points, I think it was like a child, right? I mean, in the first 15, 16 years, it was just about doing all kinds of masti. Then when you got into class 10th and 11th and 12th, that's when you sort of start figuring out what do you want to do next. At that point, I saw my sister was studying to be a doctor, or she was already a doctor at that point in time. And I saw that she had to toil really hard. She'd like sleep with this 2 kg book on her chest and pass out at 2 a.m. I said, this is not something which I can picture myself doing. And my other two sisters were teachers. So somehow by elimination, I chose engineering, and it was interesting because I was very clear I wanted to go to IIT. My first attempt, I didn't make it.
Acha.
Right. So it was on the second attempt when I made it. First time, I therefore went to DCE for about a year. I didn't really go, I kept preparing. But I was clear that I wanted to go to, an IIT, and therefore was fortunate enough to get in the second time. And some of these things which, where I feel in life, luck is always underrated and skill is overrated. More often than not, it's a package. There's a part that luck plays and the part that skill and hard work plays. But sometimes you attribute that luck to skill, right? Whether it's in our business or in life in general. So if I had stayed in DC or DIT at that point, I probably would have, taken a different path. But I
Yeah.
chose IIT Delhi and, did engineering. Similarly, when I was graduating, my first two interviews were in Deloitte and McKinsey, Deloitte and Cap One, which I went to the final rounds but couldn't make it. And McKinsey happened after that. And again, I thank my stars because it gave me such good grounding. And I still feel, a lot for McKinsey and the firm that it is, because I'm here partly because of that training, the IIT, you know, ecosystem that gives. So there is a part that each of these experiences have played in some ways for being where I am.
But do you believe in luck? Do you think luck exists? Or
100%. I mean, I think we end up, as human beings, we are wired to be deterministic. What I mean by that is we think of life as an equation that, 2 plus 3 equals 5. But more often than not, 90% of the time, life is not about equations, right? It's about actually dealing with something which is ambiguous, which can have 5 different solutions, 5 different pathways. So how do you choose which path to go down on, right? That's where there's a probability with each path. The probability may vary depending on who's, involved. So therefore, I feel luck and element of, probability plays a big part. Even in what we do, eventually we are trying to judge the probability of the risk reward playing out
yeah,
in when we underwrite an investment. And that's a judgment. There isn't, luckily, despite the hype on AI, we still feel a lot of things AI will be able to do, but hopefully this piece around judgment,
yeah.
maybe it'll take some time to fully comprehend, right? Because it requires a certain level of judgment, which nature has, imprinted in us over the years, which is hard for a machine to fully take over.
But it's very difficult to quantify luck, right? Because I'll tell you where I'm coming from. So I'll just draw an, you said you play sports. So a quick analogy. So for example, some people would feel that Rishabh Pant rides on luck. But I feel that there is a lot of skill which
Yes.
is there on the play.
100%.
And there are a lot of people who would keep relying on luck instead of putting in the hard work. So I feel that luck is just that extra bit which happens if you have. I mean, जो Lionel Messi क्या बोलता है कि 10 years of it took 10 years of hard work for me to become an overnight success.
Correct.
So I believe that is important to have.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, see, without hard work, without discipline, without deep practice, you can't, rely on luck
Yeah.
for you to be a world-class professional in anything.
Yeah.
And therefore, more often than not, it's just acknowledging that luck plays a role. And sometimes, despite everything, because of some bad luck, you will not get to the desired outcome.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a negative sort of element. And there are times when you may have not given it your best, but because of something or the other, it feels like it's your best performance. Right? So acknowledging the role of luck is important, but at the same time, not shirking away from the discipline and the hard work that is needed to get there is quite important. Like even in what we do eventually, when we look at a business to invest, you have to follow due process, right? You may have followed everything in the process, whatever you've laid out. But sometimes there are things like unknown risks which play out. So it may translate into a bad outcome. That doesn't take away from the fact that you followed good process, just bad luck has happened.
Yeah.
Versus you may not have followed process, but luck was favorable, so it still, became a good outcome. So eventually, what you need to keep in mind is the process, the approach you follow, versus because luck is, hard to, replicate.
Yeah.
Right? It's not in your control. It's an uncontrollable in some ways.
Yeah.
So just acknowledging that and recognizing the role it plays, sometimes in your favor, sometimes not in your favor.
Yeah.
What is constant is
Yeah.
the work you do.
Because I mean, the way I look at it is that so many a times my colleagues they would have knocked on at least 90-95 doors of clients, and they've just not opened the door. And one client they didn't expect to open the door, and they knocked at 96th time.
Yeah.
And sometimes they feel that, oh wow, I was so lucky that I got through this client. I said that no, there's those 94 doors which has not opened. Don't ignore that. I mean, because of you kept going from one not open door to the other. Very few will do that.
True.
Yeah. So I think there is a certain journey which you have to walk. I mean, for anybody to, I mean, I've hardly seen a lucky CEO or a lucky founder of $1 billion company. There's so much of hard work which goes behind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
So you also mentioned that whole selflessness thing from your dad. Do you remember any instance, or for that matter, from?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a teacher, right? So, I remember there were times when, some of his friends would approach him for teaching their kids. And he would go to the extent of the kid wouldn't come home to study. He would offer that I will come and
Oh wow.
also that's and that would at some points also make my mother and some of the rest of us saying, this level of
You're taking for a ride.
yeah. So that is the kind of person he was.
Oh wow.
So it gives you a sense of how he used to always put others before himself, and that also in some ways rubbed off on all of us. Right? Obviously, we were a product of both our mother and our father, but this selflessness in some ways was remarkable. When he passed away in 2012, one could see it. When people who remembered him for what he did for them.
Wow. And usually, being the youngest kid, you are highly protected in nature. So, and this also I've seen that a lot of sons who are third or fourth son after two or three daughters, they are slightly subdued or underconfident. You mentioned that in the initial phase, that phase was there. What clicked or what changed from that moment for you to maybe, I mean, become whatever you are maybe today? I mean,
Yeah.
kahin to journey was start to you.
Correct. I think you're right.
Sorry.
I guess, to some extent, while I was shy and underconfident, like I mentioned, I was decent in academics. So the first time I probably got some validation was when I moved from the school I was in grade 10 in Oxford, which was close to where we used to live, to DPS Arkepuram. And that was the first time there was a bit of validation that because DPS at that time we are still probably is called factory, for sending kids to IIT and the most premier institute. So एक वो validation था. Then when I eventually cracked IIT, right, that was another. So that probably, and I'm hypothesizing because actually I can't fully say for sure when the tipping point happened, but some of those things started building my confidence a little more. I would say it was still, confidences of different kinds. One is self-confidence,
Yeah.
which is being confident of your own ability. Second is being able to, let's say, speak publicly,
Yeah.
addressing a large gathering. That is something which may still be some distance away. Like, for instance, that took time for me
Sure.
to be comfortable with. But at least self-confidence started happening as I, crossed one milestone after another. Like I couldn't speak in English as I was mentioning earlier, but then I put my mind to it and, I improved my vocabulary. I would do deep practice, right, when I went to IIT. And during that, with another friend, we would practice together. And then eventually it became a lot more fluent, right, back in the day. So I think those were the things which I would say contributed. And then McKinsey happened. Then post McKinsey, HBS happened for MBA. So all those were, I would say, which is why I'm saying luck plays a role, because while I did make all the effort, I think there were several other deserving candidates as well who could have gone into IIT or McKinsey or HBS. But because I got that validation, I got that opportunity, it provided me a platform to push myself. In IIT, I pushed myself. I realized midway through the journey that engineering is not my cup of tea, right? I like something which is more business management. So, the last 2 years of my program, I focused my energies on that. And therefore, instead of either a tech job or, a technical job, I ended up choosing consulting. Similarly, when I went to, McKinsey, I realized great grounding in problem solving, really sort of being close to senior decision makers, corporate leaders. But I felt I didn't see myself being a consultant for life.
Sure.
So then what next, right? Luckily, I got an opportunity for a year to spend time at the Gates Foundation, which was very different kind of experience from being in the corporate boardrooms. And then went to business school. Again, there going in, I was thinking more, healthcare, pharma industry, because that's where my background was. But destiny sometimes different things in store. I ended up, Sanish, who was he was my partner and co-founder. He had moved from McKinsey to General Atlantic at that time. So, I ended up interning at GA back in 2005, and that opened another window that gave me again sort of a peek into what the investing world looked like, which was interesting. I still did another summer also at the same time, like
Yeah.
in a biotech firm, but then I made my choice to be an investor, and luckily 20 years later, unlike engineering and consulting, investing still feels like a passion, something where there's a lifelong learning happening. Right, it goes back to I guess the journey of having been raised in a teaching family. Being a student, being curious, learning every day is very important, and investing offers you that opportunity. So I think every passing stage gave me that confidence. And I think a lot of friends you will ask, who've seen me over the years, you'll see that they've seen that confidence getting built up because of the opportunity that got offered and the ability to absorb that
Yeah.
and build your confidence.
Yeah.
So grateful for that.
So, so Nishant, a lot of people would aspire to have this career path or this, right from an IIT to an MBB. Then you did Harvard, which is, an Ivy League, and then building a career in the investing world.
Right.
So, an investing world with a large global private equity fund. So with so many large brands coming in, I was speaking with a candidate who was part of a global private equity fund, and he was telling me that I used to get so many calls at that point in time. But the moment I started something of my own, those calls disappeared. He did more in fashion space,
Right.
and not in investing space. But he said that he did say that I mean, जब खुद का चालू करते हो तो फिर there are a lot of ground realities which start coming in. And आप लोग ने भी with such great pedigree, I mean, coming of all for all three of you.
Yeah.
To be able to start something again from scratch, going to LPs, asking for money कि हम लोग कर देंगे आपके लिए, etc., and building a Indian brand,
Yeah.
which आप लोग का नाम भी काफी हिंदी है, right? Kedara. So in the world of, I mean, all the Warburg Pincus, General Atlantic, or KKRs of the world, you were trying to build something. Where did that courage come to start something of your own?
Yeah. I think, to be honest, in some of these decisions, there is a fine balance between emotion and logic, right? If you are your analytical side, doing analysis, cash flow, you will not be able to take the leap of faith,
Yeah.
right? Because that risk will never pass muster. But because there is an emotive side, and that emotive side, is getting appealed by the fact that there's a large opportunity, which a more agile, nimble, firm can tap into to full potential. Obviously, we had the benefit, the three of us had the benefit of really growing up in very reputed firms like
Yeah.
Sunish and I in General Atlantic, Manish and Temasek. And, we really owe our investing grounding
Yeah.
to those firms,
Yeah.
right? Which was terrific. But equally, I think we realized that there's a large opportunity out there, for us to, it was hard to ignore. There's always, as you grow a little older, there's that entrepreneurial itch that, sometimes gets the better of you. And if maybe it was just me alone, it would have probably been different. But because there was, us, the three of us together, I think we in some ways inspired and motivated each other, to take the plunge. And at that point, honestly, we didn't have some fancy ambition that we will build Kedara into, a global world-class sort of investment firm. It was saying, look, let's focus on getting off the ground. Right? Because we were largely coming from a middle-class background, right? I mean, I didn't think I would ever have been an entrepreneur. If you were to ask anyone, including me, back in the day, even in HPS, even in IIT, would you pursue entrepreneurship? I would have probably not put a lot of probability to it, right? It just step by step, as your confidence increases and you feel there's something, you take that leap of faith. So that was the ambition. So first fund, we were again fortunate that we, at the same time, there were a couple of other folks who were raising and they were unable to, but we were fortunate that we got to the other side, thanks to a lot of our investors and early backers who backed us. So that trust then had to be obviously, repaid in equal measure. And luckily for us, I think the team that we built, the focus on culture from day one, all that helped us to deliver, to make some great investments, partner with phenomenal entrepreneurs and deliver a good outcome. So once that happened, in let's say from 2013 to 2017, then I think we started raising our aspirations, saying, look, we've created something which is solid, which has a really, institutional flavor. Can we build this into something which as seen as a world-class investment firm? Even if we remain focused on India, the intent would be to not be second to anyone, right? We should be seen in the same breath. When an entrepreneur thinks of partnering or finding a home for their business, they should think of us in the same breath as a Warburg Pincus or a Blackstone or a KKR.
Yeah.
Which at that time seemed like tall order, but today,
Exactly.
we've come a long distance.
Hmm.
And the starting point of that is talent. Today, talent, when they look at different, homes, I think Kedara is up there in terms of, people who want to work at Kedara because the culture is such which allows people to be themselves, right? We've focused on, that specifically because when we started, we couldn't be the highest paymasters. We didn't have a brand that people would flock to. So the only thing we would focus on is, can we give them a learning atmosphere which allows them to learn at the fastest possible pace, right? That was one. Can we help people be heard? Can they see an impact of their voice, which is hard to see in large systems sometimes, right? Will they be able to be themselves? Will they feel a sense of psychological safety? So all these things we ended up solving for, right? Which helped us in some ways attract the like-minded set of people. It's almost like you're attracting more and more entrepreneurs. So one of the things, we look for is that entrepreneurial streak in people, the hustle when we recruit. The intellectual honesty, the obligation of dissent, element of collaboration and leadership, right? Those are things which some of our values, I mean, we have 5 values which we try and live more than just, putting them on a piece of paper. But that's really what has helped us along the way.
What made you guys choose? So you guys are a buyout and growth equity
Yeah.
fund. What made you choose that over just doing a VC
Yeah.
and investing in early stage startups, etc.?
I think it was probably, a combination of what we felt our skill set was most relevant for. Because in our previous avatars in General Atlantic and Temasek, we were doing growth equity. At that time, the Indian market itself was growth equity. Buyout was very infrequent. Right now, obviously, things have changed and buyout is a significant part of the market. But back in the day, so that's what we knew best, right? So it was saying, look, let's stay true to our core competence. VC wasn't something which we really had done or understood that well. So VC was clearly not. But what we recognized was that the market was going to move from growth to growth and buyout. And people were making a choice. They were either doing growth or buyout, and some people were doing both. So we said, look, we will do both because our focus is India, right? That's what we know, and we feel there's massive opportunity on both sides. So we would rather not restrict ourselves to one or the other, but focus our energies on both. The opportunity also felt very compelling. We felt that, look, we could back great entrepreneurs and enable them to reach their full potential and the business's full potential. But equally, we could back ourselves in finding great managers who could be entrepreneurs and, build businesses, a bit like what, GK has done in Vishal, for instance. And the other context, what, let's say, Piyush has done with Lenskart. So I think the idea was that we saw massive opportunity on both sides. And we felt that we should, take full advantage of the opportunity set. So that's how we started. Obviously, things have kept evolving since then. I think from a largely growth-oriented market today, operating capabilities have become very important, and that's what we have focused our energies on, to really build that operating muscle and be seen as a business builder, not just a financial investor. Because historically, that's where our industry has been. But as the industry has matured, even in the US and more mature markets, I think eventually being an operator and having the right mix of operating and investing is what will be the key to success going forward.
Sure. Why is this? So I've read somewhere that what has started happening is they said the second generation is not ready to take over the business from the first generation. Is that the reason why the buyout market is growing so much?
That's definitely one of the reasons. I think, I mean, it is, see, we're living in a world where people are free to sort of choose what they feel passionate. It's a bit like, like engineering consulting wasn't something which I wanted to pursue. Equally, I think the second and third generations of today's, business families are also choosing a path for themselves.
Yeah.
And in many cases, that path is not the same as what their, fathers and forefathers have done. So that's definitely creating opportunity, because at some level, having built, really phenomenal businesses, as founders, you want to find the right home for, the business. Because for all of us, whether it's a founder of the firm, whether it's us, the most important thing that's relevant is how do we build something which outlasts us,
Yeah.
right? That's really the key. Our horizon may be whatever, 10 years, 6 years, 5 years. A founder's horizon may be perpetual, but even then the organization's horizon will be infinite,
Correct.
right, to some extent, if it's built in the right way. So I think that is definitely one of the reasons why the buyout market is flourishing. And I think that will continue to happen more and more.
Sure.
because that's how even in the US and Europe, the buyout market is flourished. I mean, there's obviously the added advantage in those markets of leverage being available to be able to do buyouts, etc., which is not there in India. But structurally, the biggest trigger is that, you know, they've seen multi-generational families and some of this dynamic is played out there.
Sure, understood. Private equity funds usually are not so human intensive, right? When I say human intensive, it is not like an FMCG company which will have thousands of employees. At best, it will be 100, 150 at
Yeah.
best, right? So, why? And you guys speak, and when you were explaining how you're building Kedara as well, there's a lot of emphasis on culture.
Yeah.
So, how do you define culture, and why is it important for a good culture to exist in a lean kind of environment?
No, absolutely. I think it's a good question. So we're obviously, our industry in general is lean. Right? If you have, people like us, we have maybe a 30, 40 member investment operating team, total team size of 75, managing 6 billion AUM. Blackstone may have a few hundred people, but managing $1 trillion of AUM. So it is a business which, from a ratio of what you manage to the people you deploy, is very skewed. Having said that, culture is equally important because you're really making high voltage decisions. You have to recognize the consistency of doing this over and over again can only come through a set of lived, shared experiences that everyone buys into. Right? Eventually, what is culture? Culture is nothing but a glue which binds everyone in the organization. Right? And I'm not the sole custodian of culture, or no one else is. Ultimately, in any institution, any company, culture is the summation of the behavior of everyone in the firm. Right? How, as maybe founders of a firm or senior people in the firm, how you role model, how you set examples becomes a way for others to follow as well. And that, in some ways is what defines the values of that organization. Uh, because it's a people driven business, Naveen, um, it's important to have that cultural values and tenets very clearly defined, because otherwise there is no IP, there is no moat, right? You can have people come and go, but if there isn't a shared purpose, a belief, then you'll not work. It's a bit like a team sport, right? I mean, we are a team. We could be a team of stars who are pulling in different directions, or we could be a team of like, I give this example that New Zealand is a great example in the cricketing world, where you wouldn't find one star in New Zealand, right? But they play so well as a team, and they've beaten the best of us,
Correct.
right? And sometimes in most other teams, including India, you'll have stars who may or may not come together.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why this notion of culture becomes important. In our case, those values are entrepreneurial and agile while staying disciplined, humility, non hierarchical and team orientation, intellectual honesty with an obligation to dissent, being accountable and taking ownership, and remaining passionate and perseverance. So these are some 5 values which we have, which translate into behaviors on a day-to-day basis. Like when you're in the middle of a investment decision, you can lose sight of objectivity. You almost get wedded, invested into a deal. So for you and for someone who's not that involved in the deal, it's important to try and be as objective as possible, and without disrespecting the person, practicing radical candor to share a point of view, saying, look, you may be underestimating this risk and overestimating the opportunity. So the risk reward that you're assessing may be slightly overstated in some ways, right? So some of those things help us improve the quality of our decisioning, right? The fact that we've been able to attract some of the best talent from global firms because they feel they have a certain latitude, the ability to sort of, you know, do things what they want, not necessarily focus a lot on educating sort of a group which is sitting 7,500 miles away, right? So focusing energies on issues that matter, and feeling a sense of empowerment, ownership. That I think has helped us differentiate ourselves significantly, right? Because in most cases in our industry, you're recruiting the smartest of people, you're paying them top dollar. So some of this gets taken for granted.
Yeah.
More often than not, in our industry, the investing business takes priority over the business of investing. So deal making takes precedence over culture building or over thinking about how to build the best organization. That you almost sort of assume वो हो जाएगा because driven लोग आ रहे हैं, smart लोग आ रहे हैं और मुझे
Correct.
पैसा दे रहे हो तो अपने आप हो जाएगा सब.
They'll take care of themselves.
But I mean, I wish it was as
Yeah.
straightforward as that, because even the most driven, high-performing people ultimately need a war cry, ultimately need a rallying point to come around, right? And we've consciously chosen to self-select each other, the people over here. Therefore, sense of belonging, a sense of ownership, which is what keeps us together. Even in times when, people would try and, let's say, and you're in the recruiting business, so you'd know, right? There are several folks who would give an arm and a leg to recruit from Kedara, but it's
Yeah.
not that easy
Yeah.
because it's not a job for people. Everyone, wakes up and enjoys being at the firm. So it's hard to give that up because you wouldn't get that sort of an experience and opportunity in most other places.
Yeah, yeah. So, whose responsibility is culture? Because there's a lot of while we are also building the company, I feel that everybody at some level or the other, it's my responsibility to translate it to the team.
Yes.
But it's team's responsibility to translate it to the outside world as well. And what kind of efforts do you guys put in terms of keeping that intact? Because institutionalizing culture is, I think, one of the toughest things which you can do.
100%. I couldn't agree more with you. So I think culture is everyone's responsibility.
Yeah.
While we may have, let's say, in this situation, between us, I may be spending a lot more time on culture as much as on investments. But eventually, the only way culture gets internalized is if everyone is living and breathing.
Yeah.
Right? Because more often than not, behavior is the lowest common denominator. Right? You may have a stated value or you may have a process, but eventually how people behave is what becomes the norm.
Yeah.
Right? That process and everything is irrelevant. Right? So therefore, role modeling, right? Whether it's in team meetings, saying, look, we are not going to take our phones and not be distracted. We have to respect each other's time and we'll be fully present, as an example. Or calling out sort of situations where, in a deal team, I may be the senior most person, but I've had the benefit of someone challenging me and saying, look, I disagree, and this is why I disagree. And me having the humility to accept that and saying, look, this is a fair point, and we shouldn't do this, we should take this into account, right? That the more you reinforce publicly, the more people see, they know that, look, this is something which is the way of life in here. So constantly role modeling, constantly setting examples, calling out, examples of good behavior, good citizenship, automatically, creates what I'm reading this book called The Talent Code, which from Daniel Coyle, which talks about myelin, which is something which connects our, neurons in the mind, which is essentially when you do deep practice, there's this fiber which keeps wrapping around our nerve endings.
Okay.
And that fiber basically creates something like muscle memory. So, like if you were to do Tiger Woods was to do a golf swing, because he's done it so many times, it automatically happens. So it's a bit like, how does culture become the muscle memory of the organization? That's what the aspiration is. And you have to be paranoid about it, because any one deviation from that has the potential of derailing the culture agenda to some extent, right? So all of us across the organization, in particular, paranoid about not having this cultural fabric get diluted in any way. So yeah, I think that's how we've tried to keep it, in check, and it's continued to thrive. Like I was talking to, I keep having these, once in 2 months conversations with everyone in the firm. That's my routine. I keep checking in to see how people are doing, what can I, take away from that, and therefore apply. And the consistent thing that everyone says, from the youngest to the senior most people, is that when we talk to people around, no one seems to be in the same place where we are in terms of just enjoying coming to work and having fun, having the freedom and the latitude to do what we enjoy doing, people being invested in each other's success,
Super.
no politics, right? All of that, being a true meritocracy. So all of this, in some ways, obviously, it continues to be work in progress. I don't think we can ever consider ourselves to be perfect, but I think we're always at it,
Mm.
never taking anything for granted.
And from the leader's viewpoint, how important is it to spend that non-business or informal time with your team in order to, because I believe that you become aligned to a purpose if you like each other.
Yes.
Like means not necessarily fond of,
Yeah.
but respect each other mutually, and that can happen only if you know each other
Correct.
truly well.
Correct.
So how important is that, and at what point in time, because sometimes the leaders may also come and say that yaar matlab, what about my work life balance? Where does it go for it all? So how do you manage that?
No, I think it's a great question. I mean, and it's very important
Yeah.
to be invested in each other, because अगर आप केवल काम के लिए बात कर रहे हो, तो वो तो transactional है.
So Nishant, a lot of people have this complaint from the private equity world, especially the global as well as large funds like yours, that यार मतलब हम लोग में capability है, we understand the business very well. उन लोग क्यों इतना stuck हैं कि education, एक certain education pedigree चाहिए, consulting चाहिए, investment banking चाहिए, etc. etc. So so this world, sometimes the outside world feels that this world is too restricted between themselves. And I mean, why is business pedigree not kept into consideration versus if that person does not have a strong education pedigree? So simple answer is that why IT and consulting and investment banking, why is this fixed formula? Is it because you guys are bound by LPs, or has this been a success formula? And why not give some pathway in the investing world to the business operating guys who have been ex-founders or for ran and scale businesses considerably? Because we have started seeing that happening in the VC world at least.
Yeah. No, it's a great question and something which we debate internally also. I think because at some level in our industry, in our business, there is a lot of value in diversity, right? And diversity could be diversity of experience, it could be gender, it could be, backgrounds, whatever, right? So to that extent, I think we're consciously trying to recruit a more diverse team. Having said that, like you said, one, this is a formula that's worked well. So it's not necessarily LPs at all. It's just that we've had a lot of success with folks with, whether they come from a, IIT or a top tier
Yeah.
institution and then went to either business school or not, but, worked in consulting, worked in banking. So that has worked well. Typically, this is an apprenticeship business, which is you learn by observing others, right? And therefore, you grow sometimes as a pre-MBA analyst and go all the way to partner. Sometimes you grow as a post-MBA associate and then go all the way to partner. So your ability to spend time in what I call deep practice in the investing parlance is important, right? The challenge, the way I think about the operating side of the business, I think we are consciously now trying to expand from our perspective, at least, to look at people who have operating backgrounds, but they are more suited for, playing the role of someone who's driving value creation in our portfolio, right? And over time, there may be opportunities which may get created where if they have the ability, then they can play a dual role where they drive value creation as well as investing. But that's where we are starting as of now. Most cases, you need to have a certain operating experience for you to be able to bring that to bear. Typically, that could be 5, 10, 15 years, right? So the challenge becomes in those cases, then you'll have to have lateral sort of folks. And our biggest success has been growing from within,
Organic.
right? So we're trying to problem solve around that because I think what I said in the beginning still remains the overarching principle, that how do we increase diversity of viewpoints around the table. I think we have now, with some of the new operating partners, we have, what we're building in terms of operating muscle. We have more diversity, but we can definitely do more, at least as far as Kedara is concerned. I think from an industry standpoint, you'll probably still see, most still sticking to the tried and tested formula of consulting, banking, certain education pedigree. And we will also do that, but we'll also be more open-minded to looking at diverse profiles.
Okay.
So that's something which I fully take as a point, and hopefully we'll be able to, in some ways prioritize hunger and just drive over
Yeah,
education pedigree as a surrogate.
sure.
Because eventually, one of the things when I look back and look at our team, the one thing which distinguishes whether you have education pedigree or not, or whether your education pedigree is tier 1, tier 2, hunger is what matters at the end of the day. Right? I mean, I know in several examples you may have, All India J rank 1 or department rank 1, who may or may not have been as successful as someone who was maybe 10th rank or 20th rank in the department, but was just a lot more suited for success in the real world versus the way we're taught to be successful in the exam world.
Yeah.
Kitne marks lie, is what becomes the way you get judged versus, is that something which will have any application in real life or not?
So, as an aspirant who wants to build a career in investing, especially in the private investment space, what kind of qualities beyond academics is something which I need to hone on or work on for me to be able to become a successful investor?
A great question. I think there is, maybe I'll answer it in two ways. One is the attributes that we look for when we screen for people, and then obviously over time, how do you become a great investor? I think we try and look for entrepreneurial hustle, at least as far as Kedara is concerned. This may vary, but for us, that hunger, that ownership, curiosity, right, is incredibly important. The ability to solve problems in an unstructured manner, right? Being resourceful, or jugadu as it's called, in terms of, with limited resources, doing a lot more.
Can you give an example in this? I mean, I would love to.
I think like for instance, you work Monday to Friday, right? But there may be times when you need to make an exception and go meet an entrepreneur on a Saturday or a Sunday. I mean, I don't need to tell anyone in the team. They will work around it, and they will also get one of our advisors who's maybe like a senior CEO wouldn't want to do it,
Yeah.
but he will also, because it's their, convincing,
Yeah.
go with them on a Saturday or a Sunday and do that discussion without being nudged from anyone, because it's self-propelled in some way. So that's the example in my mind where you're not saying, okay, Monday to Friday sab kuch hota hai, right? If there's an opportunity, you need to move fast, you need to get something done, you will make it happen. And that's happened multiple times, in our situations. So that's one example of that.
Sure.
Then the other thing I would say, what we look for is intellectual honesty and obligation to dissent. This is also a McKinsey value, and I think a lot of consulting firms has this, where being radically candid, being honest, becomes incredibly important. Because when you're making such important decisions, you're investing several $100 million in a company, you need to be clear that you're taking an informed decision, having weighed all the risks and rewards in mind, right? The third thing I feel which is important is leadership and collaboration, which is how well you work in a team. Do you put team over self? Are you self-aware? Are you able to really have gravitas, presence, right? A certain amount of resilience, to keep tackling failures, because there will be failures. So that becomes sort of the third bucket in my mind. So I think those three, I would say, is what one looks for beyond academic pedigree and, functional experience and so on and so forth. Now, what it takes to be a great investor is to use these eventually to build a great temperament, right? The biggest, I would say, ability of an investor is to have a calm temperament, because the cycle of greed and fear, when things are going well, it's a bull market, you can be very greedy, and you choose to invest in things which you should have probably been more careful about. And similarly, when things are not going well and there's a element of fear in the market, you should also be at that point discerning enough to know ki kahan pe invest karna hai. requires temperament, which is calm, composed. You can remove yourself, detach yourself, and exercise judgment. That I think is incredibly important. Second thing which I think is important is the ability to spot patterns and trends early. Because alpha tabhi banta hai if there are 50 people who see the same opportunity, if the alpha goes away, right? But the ability to generate outside returns is a function of seeing something earlier. Like when we invested in packaging as a consumer proxy in our first fund, ahead of packaging becoming a fad, we were able to, partner with great entrepreneurs, get in at fair value and then benefit from that journey, right? So that's the other thing which is critical. And I'd say the third thing is the ability to influence and, practice tough love, which is, a lot of time, whether you're a minority investor or a control investor, you need to be able to enable entrepreneurs, CEOs, and sometimes it requires a certain, a way of operating where you're giving your point of view, but letting that person take the call. And there are times when if things are not going in the right direction, then you have to exercise your judgment to change things also. So being able to do that, know when to influence, when to take charge, right? And being comfortable with taking a call which could go wrong, right? So it's not like everything is right, but being decisive about it, I think is important. So those three things I feel make a good investor, just being very disciplined around that, because you can get carried away and pay crazy prices sometimes and they come back and bite you.
Sure. So a lot of times, I mean, I've asked investors in terms of what they look for in founders, but I think with you, I would want to reverse the question. When I'm raising as a founder money from investors, and if it obviously, given that my business is investment worthy, and when obviously I'll have choices between which which investor to choose, because there will be multiple investors who will be buying my business.
Correct.
What kind of investor should I choose for my business? I mean, when I'm partnering with somebody.
No, it's a great question and something which I think probably doesn't get enough, attention
Yeah.
and reflection. At least in my mind, obviously, I'm biased because I'm, looking at it from the perspective of a potential groom,
Yeah.
looking for a match. But I
Yeah.
think more often than not, because of the nature of this industry, a lot of focus goes on valuation. कौन सबसे अच्छी वैल्यू दे रहा है मुझे?
Yeah.
It's a bit like, in शादी में डाउरी कहाँ से ज़्यादा मिल रही है, ज़्यादा, right? Without looking
Yeah.
at the qualities of
Yeah.
तो वर वधू में वधू
Yeah.
वर में क्या क्या qualities है वो देखना बहुत ज़रूरी है, but sometimes you end up looking at completely sort of irrelevant things, right, to some extent. I'm not saying valuation is irrelevant, it's important, it's very important, but I would prioritize number one, the chemistry and the value system alignment, because it's like a marriage. It's nothing different from a marriage. And therefore, in the long run, what will matter more is the chemistry of the team and the partner, in particular, the deal lead in particular with that of the founder or the CEO. It'll allow you to have conversations when the going is tough. And it'll allow you to have a partner, someone to talk to when things are not going well. And equally, when things are going well, someone to challenge you, make you stay paranoid, right? Because in our life, good times are bad times are good times. You always have to keep, at it, right? So that's one part. Chemistry and value system alignment is critical. Second thing I would say is some alignment on ambition, right? If as a founder or CEO, you have an aspiration and it's not in line with what, let's say, the investor is thinking, then there's bound to be issues. So it's better to have that alignment or lack of alignment upfront, because then you work with full energy to go towards that, right? There will be some pivots required to get there, but at least there's alignment on that front, right? You're not really second guessing each other. That again also gets somewhat de-emphasized. I don't think people really talk about what's the vision for this.
Yeah.
Are you guys aligned on the vision for this business? Too often you're talking about the here and now and not where you want to get to. So I think that's sort of the other piece. I think the third piece in my mind is the ability of the investor to add value, right? It could be domain expertise in a given sector. It could be just wisdom
Yeah.
on how to build a culture, which we spoke about a lot. It could be something else, but the ability to take the business into a different orbit, right? You may end up paying 5, 10, 15% lower value upfront, but can it become a meaningfully different business? Usko chamka do bilkul,
Yeah.
you know, from being a good business to being a great business, right? So I would say those three things in my mind are super critical. And then obviously whether it's valuation, whether it's, you know, how you work in a partnership format or whatever the construct is, those also become important. But these three in my mind, you know, are super critical to judge.
Sure. Has it ever happened with you, that when you've seen a business, I've seen sometimes this happening in Shark Tank, for example. That's my only real view of the investing world at the moment. But when people evaluate businesses, and let's say if you have seen a business and you were super fond of a founder, and and you feel that this business is just on the brink, ये फाउंडर थोड़ा और स्ट्रेच मार ले तो फिर ये बिजनेस विल गो टू द नेक्स्ट ऑर्बिट. But so out here there are two things. One is you are seeing an opportunity. Second is there is a human side which can also say that यार मतलब मैं क्यों ये opportunity लूँ जबकि ये पूरा value unlock खुद से कर सकता है. तो have you guys ever walked off from a deal because it was super awesome and the founder could have done it with themselves?
It's a very interesting question. I'm trying to recall, you know, if something like that has happened. I think what's definitely happened is there are situations where we've been very honest,
Acha.
saying, you know, do you really need a private equity partner, right? I mean, you have everything that it takes.
Yeah.
Or maybe in some situations, you need to do ABC before you get a private equity partner. Whether it's, you know, within the family, there's some clarity and settlement, etc., that needs to happen. So it could be either way. But we've had those sort of situations for sure. I think to some extent, it requires, like I said, a certain level of self-awareness and honesty, you know, because it's ultimately a judgment. There isn't a right or wrong answer. You're forming a judgment based on what you know, on what the best path is in this particular case. I think I just feel that there'll always be situations where, you know, like for instance, I think when I look at the Zerodha example as where I think obviously a lot of people have gone and have conversations because it's a great business. But I think eventually one thing which is clear in life is there's no free lunch.
Yeah.
Right? With whatever you do, there is a cost of it. Right? Whether it's the cost of having another decision maker on the table, whether it's a cost of, you know, the return that that investor would potentially demand.
Yeah.
You know, obviously you're, like I said, you're wired a certain way, you're building a business a certain way, you may or may not fully see eye to eye on everything with the other person, right? Which is why the point that I made earlier around alignment of value system, ambition being critical. So depending on the context, I think it should be a very honest conversation because not every business is always ready to have a partner that comes in. But many times, because of the way the industry is, sometimes, you know, in the FOMO of things or because you have different people involved in this, they push people towards some of these situations early. But I think it's important to the extent possible, jahan ho sake. I mean, I don't know, when I look back at our journey also, I think by and large, we've spent enough time becoming comfortable with each other. And we've been really fortunate to work with some phenomenal entrepreneurs and families. But uh, it always requires us to be on our toes and be honest and transparent, like you said.
Has it ever happened? How many investments in terms of numbers you
30.
30. So amongst all the investments you have made, this might be a tricky question, but has it ever happened that you were not super aligned with the founder and value system, but it turned out to be a great investment any which ways?
Yeah, I think it happens.
Okay.
It happens.
All right.
See, I mean, it depends also on I think there's a difference between being aligned on value system versus being different personality.
हाँ.
So I'll give you an example of that, right? I mean, I may be someone who's very, cost conscious, or someone who is not flashy, as an example, right? But the core attribute which binds us is the hunger and the drive to build something big. The other person may be more flashy, may not be as cost conscious, or would want to buy, travel in sort of luxury for that matter, or buy the best cars. I think we have to recognize that everyone's wired differently. That doesn't take away from the fundamental hunger and the core attribute of building something. You just express yourself in a different way. And therefore, neither should you judge that person, nor should that person judge you. And that's a realization that takes time to, for the penny to drop.
Yeah.
That there can be different people within the same firm in a different context, but you have to ultimately look at the core attributes. वहाँ पे alignment है या नहीं है. अगर वहाँ पे alignment नहीं है तो different बात है. Hunger ही नहीं है तो फिर मतलब then you're essentially leading an entitled life in some ways, right? So वो different है. But if you are making money and you want to spend it your way, who am I to sort of say you should be doing it the way I do it? That is an individual call at some level, right? So those are situations where I think investments have worked out well, and I think that will continue to happen. But उसके लिए maturity चाहिए कि आप जियो और जीने दो, because you don't need to impose your value system on someone else.
Yeah.
Or the way you run your life,
Yeah.
and vice versa.
Because the way I look at it is that मेरे को हमेशा लगता है कि जिस कंपनी का अच्छा कल्चर होगा उसका बिजनेस तो बहुत अच्छा होगा. अब I've seen a lot of successful businesses जिनके culture is like all over the place. मतलब every employee you talk to, they keep bitching about the company. अगर मैं इन्वेस्टर रहता मैं ऐसी कंपनी में पैसा कभी नहीं लगाता, लेकिन ये कंपनी इतनी बड़ी बन चुकी है ऑलरेडी, तो फिर दैट्स व्हाट देन मेक्स मी क्वेश्चन कि इज दिस द ओनली वे, इज माय वैल्यू सिस्टम इज द ओनली वे टू ग्रो, और आई जस्ट टेक अ कॉल कि जो मेरे वैल्यू सिस्टम में अलाइन होगा उसी के साथ मैं काम करूंगा.
So which is I'm saying, I think we have to distinguish between value system and personality.
हाँ.
Value system में I think compromise मुश्किल है.
Yeah.
अगर आप let's say if you practice a certain level of integrity, honesty, transparency, and there is a mismatch there,
Yes.
then it's an issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then it won't work.
Yeah.
But like I said, if my personality is under the radar, your personality is, more in the limelight, that's okay. I don't think that's an issue. So वो distinguish करना बहुत ज़रूरी है. I would rather be in the place where what you said, कि look, there may be situations where if there is value system mismatch, and because of whatever reason that company is doing well, I'd rather still stay away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because वो long run में कहीं ना कहीं manifest होगी. And frankly, for us as a firm, me in particular as an individual, what matters is, do we have a good share of all the high quality investments that happen? I can never be doing everything.
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
As long as we have a respectable share of all the good things that we wanted to be part of, that's good enough. थोड़ा मतलब एक जिसे कहते हैं संतुष्टि
Yeah.
जरूरी है.
Yeah.
राइट. वो संतुष्टि और ईर्ष्या या ग्रीड में बहुत वो है, फिल लाइन है.
Correct.
जरूरी है कि ठीक है, नहीं हो तो कोई नहीं, वी कैन लेट इट बी.
Yeah. आपकी पूरी जर्नी में निशांत, what has been your biggest pitfalls or mistakes of your life?
I mean, I think all of us have made enough. I think for me, again, I consider myself extremely lucky कि शुरू में ही एक बहुत बड़ी mistake हुई when I started my investing career, where one of my first investments ended up losing money.
अच्छा.
Right? It was something which taught me a lot, because when off the gates something like that happens, it really questions your self-belief and, are you really good at this or not? But in some ways, fortunately, because of, I guess, again, my wiring, there's a general sense of optimism. ठीक है, maybe you take this in your stride and learn from it. So, right, what I learned from it was, eventually in investing business, what matters is who you back and what you back. who you back is the person and the team you're backing, and what you back is the industry and the business you're backing. If you go wrong in either, there's a likelihood that you will, miss.
Yeah.
And more often than not, when we are young, right, we are very analytical. हमें लगता है हम हर चीज़ का आंसर निकाल सकते हैं. We build a model, but we don't know ये model तो किसी और ने deliver करना है. Right?
Yeah.
Like this model you built, but have you even spoken to the chief revenue officer or the CEO to align कि ये जो आप assumption दे रहे हो सही है? Will they be able to do this, not do this? So is the person the right person to execute on this? So some of that, connecting between the dots of the human factor with the analytical factor, वो समय के साथ ही आता है, right? That's something which evolves over time. So my biggest learning from that mistake was that I think we unfortunately went wrong in the who we backed also, but equally we also probably chose an industry and a business which was not fundamentally as good, but we got enamored because it was coming at a great value. Right? So कई बार वो value दिखता है compelling, but वो actually value trap होता है.
Yeah.
Right? So that was a big learning, and sometimes, like I said, I consider myself grateful because उसकी वजह से फिर आगे when I looked at investments, I think it's I've applied that learning every time, and it's not to say कि I haven't still gone wrong. I've still gone wrong, after that also, but luckily वो same mistake दोबारा नहीं किए. Right? I mean, and by and large, you've been able to, build a solid track record.
Great. Super. How important is it for a founder to be vulnerable? I mean, to be open about the weaknesses, to be open about their insecurities, fears and everything else. मतलब ये मैं आपसे दोनों एज अ फाउंडर ऑफ co-founder ऑफ केदारा पूछ रहा हूँ, और प्लस जब आप फाउंडर्स को इवेल्युएट करते हो तो इज दिस समथिंग व्हिच यू गाइस इंडेक्स ऑन एज वेल?
Yeah. No, I think we do. It's obviously hard to assess because see, for you to be vulnerable, you need to be incredibly secure.
Yeah.
अगर आप insecure हो तो आप vulnerable नहीं हो सकते.
भी है. हाँ.
Right? Because then you will feel judged.
Yeah.
You will feel कि, I'm being judged in that setting. So I personally feel vulnerability बहुत important है because it's a under emphasized superpower. It allows you to, because I fundamentally believe no one in the world, ultimately कोई भगवान तो है नहीं.
Yeah.
Everyone's human.
That's correct.
So everyone has the potential to make mistakes. They have made mistakes. Whether we admit it or not, we can present a brave face to the world, but we can't lie to ourselves. Deep down we know कि हमारे क्या fears हैं. अब आप वो share नहीं करना चाहते, that's a personal choice. But I feel being able to be vulnerable allows you, for people to feel कि यार, this person's human. He's like me. He's also made of flesh and blood. He also goes through the same challenges. Not sitting in an ivory tower and, sort of giving gyan or being seen as a superpower.
Yeah.
So to that extent, I think it allows you to be approachable. It allows you to sort of, again, goes back to the point of role modeling. Like for instance, if I've made a mistake in judging someone or something which I've done hasn't gone well, I've in our team meetings,
Wow.
spoken about it.
Nice.
Right? And that failure, that ability to express openly has now become a facet of our culture. So no one feels judged.
Yeah.
By and large. Obviously, some of the younger folks who come, they take time to get used to this culture. But मुझे culture होता है ना कि आप you present strength, whether it's there or not, no matter what you spin, कि यार ये है जबकि है reality कुछ और है. वो I think it's a rabbit hole that you can go down very easily. But vulnerability allows you to confront your own reality, someone else's reality.
Yeah.
And without that, how will you have difficult conversations? How will you push each other to be a better version of yourself?
Correct.
So in some ways, intent बहुत ज़रूरी है कि इस vulnerability का, जो need है वो ये है कि हम एक दूसरे को बेहतर कर रहे हैं. केदारा को बेहतर कर रहे हैं, हमें अपनी जो portfolio company उनको बेहतर कर रहे हैं, वो बहुत ज़रूरी है. Right? And by not being vulnerable, we are hurting our own interest.
Yeah.
So in my mind, it's very important. But like I said, everyone feels differently and there's a different journey. So वो journey आपको allow करना है लोगों को उस journey पे, but it is in my mind a superpower.
श्योर। आज की डेट में आई मीन जो प्राइवेट इक्विटी वर्ल्ड है, आई सॉ वन ऑफ योर प्रीवियस पॉडकास्ट एंड यू केप्ट एम्फसाइजिंग ऑन द फैक्ट दैट इंडिया से कैसे होम ग्रोन प्राइवेट इक्विटी फंड्स ज़्यादा नहीं निकले हैं। तो और जबकि वेस्टर्न कंट्रीज में अगर आप देखोगे तो फिर देयर आर लॉट ऑफ प्राइवेट होम ग्रोन प्राइवेट इक्विटी फंड्स व्हिच हैज ग्रोन एंड यू गाइस आर आई थिंक वन ऑफ द रेयरेस्ट वन व्हिच इज आल्सो इमर्ज्ड। आपको क्या लगता है ये ट्रेंड अभी और पेस लेगा where India will see more and more Kedaras coming up, or where do you think we were lacking?
I think it's a great question. I mean, sometimes, it's a combination of the opportunity set. See, obviously, India is not a US in terms of the opportunity set. It's a phenomenal, country and a lot of opportunities, but scale is different, right? The maturity curve is different. So, by virtue of that, because private equity originated in the US in some ways in the 70s and the 80s, there's been the benefit of multiple cycles and maturity that US has had, and also being the source of capital to some extent, it's therefore had a lot more global firms, expand into multiple geographies. Uh, I feel you look at sort of the innate ability of the talent in India, it's world class, right? I mean, if you look at the CEOs of Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies, disproportionately people of either Indian origin or Indians in some ways, right? So it shows that there is capability is not an issue, intent is not an issue. Sometimes you need the opportunity and the ecosystem to give you that, push. So I do feel that there will be more that will come from India, not just in our industry, but in other industries as well.
Oh,
Because I feel, I remember when I was a student, risk appetite बहुत कम होता था.
Right.
In fact, our previous generation, my parent generation, unko government job, was the sort of aspiration.
yeah.
In our case, a McKinsey type job was an aspiration. Today, being a startup CEO, like, what Adit has done in Zepto as an example, is the aspiration. So that reflects the risk appetite of the, by and large, the population, which is, I think, a very healthy sign because capital is available to back such entrepreneurial talent. And that will help us create more and more high quality businesses. I mean, our own example, like I said, we started as a small fund, but today we have the aspirations of being the best in India. Now, who knows what that may mean going forward, but at least because currently our playground is India, we want to focus our energies on India and do what's best for the country. But at the same time, like I said, we want to be seen as nothing less than a global firm in terms of culture, in terms of, talent, in terms of returns and the kind of investments we make. So, wo koi difference nahi hoga. It's just that our playground will be probably this. But I do see, more and more coming in कम होगा because उसके लिए आपको थोड़ा institutional mindset भी चाहिए. So you won't see like a plethora of firms.
Of course.
थोड़ा सा it requires you to be comfortable that eventually ये सब transitory है to some extent. You are playing a role from point A to point B as a founder of the firm. Then you hand the baton on to the next most capable leader in the firm.
Yeah.
And you move from there and the person does the same. That's the only way you'll build a firm that will outlast you. The moment you get wedded,
Yeah.
कि यार मतलब I'm the only one because of which this firm has been built and nothing else can take this firm to its logical, ambition. It'll create issues, right? So being open to evolving your role for the right of the firm and continuing to do that is a tough call. Right? Because our business is a little bit around personalities, around heroes. So अपने आप को थोड़ा सा, check में रखना is not that easy.
Yeah.
You do get sometimes carried away, which is why I feel it's not like there will be a zillion firms also, but yes, there will be firms who are able to combine that entrepreneurial hustle and institutional muscle and build something which is built for eternity will be there, but few.
Sure. And what is the biggest hurdle for private equity as an industry today in India?
I think, at the superficial level, if you were to ask most people, the biggest thing will be valuation. People say कि valuation बहुत ज़्यादा है, right? If you look at a business in India delivering, let's say, 20% growth and a 20% return on capital. And if you compare that to a business in the US or Europe, यहाँ पे let's say 20 times EBITDA पे होगा, वहाँ पे 10, 12, 13, 14 टाइम पे होगा, तो मतलब काफ़ी फ़र्क है. क्यों है वो फ़र्क, right, is the question. And again, hypothesis, there isn't a right or wrong answer. One, it's a function of the supply of capital. So there is probably a lot of capital chasing opportunities.
business.
But equally, there are fewer opportunities.
Yeah.
So that compounds the problem.
Yeah.
So to some extent, the depth of, and the breadth of opportunities available is different relative to some of the more mature markets. And therefore, the 2 or 3 that succeed
Yeah.
end up getting all the love and the capital, which means that they end up also being, therefore, very high valuation. So the fundamental reason for high valuation is because of that dynamic. So that's one issue. Second, which is a little bit linked to that, I feel, is as we do more buyouts, as we do more builds, right, lack of talent becomes a real challenge, right, in scaling, because opportunities here to take businesses which are either undermanaged or there's opportunity to take them to a different orbit. But sometimes talent, to find the right talent who is willing to take the risk, who's willing to sort of, be appropriately incentivized, have the right value system, alignment, all of that. But, it's not that straightforward, right? So that becomes the second, I would say, big challenge, especially on the buyout side. I think these, I would say, are the two primary things. But again, as someone who's solely focused on India, we have to solve for both. So therefore, we're in our mind building that muscle internally, trying to make sure that when we look at a business which needs a high quality CEO, we've identified those ahead of time, or we're creating that cadre internally. So we're putting a lot of effort in that, because in the future, that's what will differentiate, us from the rest of the industry.
Wow, nice. So you think you can create an ecosystem? I mean, from a giving to the society standpoint, so that as you said that for more and more Kedaras to come in the business, you will need the capital needs to be deployed to more and more businesses, and for those businesses to flourish, the talent needs to be upgraded to those levels. You think there is some scope for people like you guys to work towards maybe creating something which can help do this?
No, 100%. Again, it's a great observation and question, Naveen. I think if I look at it more broadly, right, one of the things which, because I've benefited personally from my own journey where my mentors, my well-wishers have guided me at different points in time, which has allowed me to be in a certain position today. So to some extent, that giving back, is embedded in that, because I benefit from it. I need to make sure that, I give back to be able to make someone else's life in the same manner, right? I think one of the things I've realized is, whether it's a musician, whether it's an artist, whether it's a investor, businessman, there are a lot of folks who have talent and hunger, but sometimes they need the right guidance, the right coach, the right mentorship. You guys have a mentorship program you've started. So in some ways, figuring out a way and means through which you match that person's passion and ability with someone who's gone through that journey and is probably 10 years ahead or 20 years ahead, will hopefully improve the probability of that person's success. So to some extent, it's not like I have I have a clear plan of how to do that. But what is clear in my mind is that you need to create this ecosystem of so-called maestros and experts in a given field, and connect them with, a group of driven individuals, hungry individuals in that field, that allows them over a long period of time be their coach in some ways, and help them improve the probability of success at every decision node. Right? It could be a musician, it could be an actor, it could be a investor, it could be a banker, it could be a sportsman, whatever it may be, but across the board. Because if you were able to do that, just think of it, right? You'll improve the probability of success, you'll improve the quality of the talent, all outcomes will improve significantly. It'll be a really amazing virtuous cycle if one can create it. That's my aspiration, but I would love to find a way to make it happen.
Sure. final question to you, Nishant. I think I've gotten the answer of to most questions which I was looking for. So one thing which so let's say if in case you have to start a business afresh today, which is outside of investing world, which sector you will choose and why?
It's an interesting question. I think I'd say it depends on the lens. So if I'm looking at it from a lens of an investor, where the scalability of the business matters, where the profitability, the return on capital matters, I probably would pick software or SaaS,
Sure.
because once you build, an IP,
Yeah.
then you can scale it really well, right? Whether it's a retail SaaS product or an enterprise SaaS product, your ability to then, like Microsoft Office or Salesforce. I mean, there is a different level of scalability. The unit economics are pretty solid. So as an investor, that's what I would, like to do. And also with the engineering talent in India where things are, I think a lot of it matches. If you were to ask me as an operator, which is driven more by passion
Yeah.
and interest and not only by just pure financial logic, I'd probably say something in health and fitness, because that's an area which is close to my heart. I feel all of us sometimes compromise on our own health and fitness while pursuing our dreams, not realizing that if you don't focus on your own health, mental fitness, physical fitness, you'll not be able to pursue those dreams, not be able to take care of your family, friends, and so on. So sometimes that basic, obvious realization eludes us. So that's been something which has, been a focus of mine in the last 5 years. And therefore, maybe something which focuses on imparting that, health and fitness journey, how to sort of, do that. Maybe something in that area would be what I would do from an operator
Nice.
lens standpoint, because it may or may not be a great business, but that's something which is close to my heart.
Of course. एक बस और अब बतिया है वो एक आपने जब वल्नरेबिलिटी की बात की थी जहाँ पे आपने बोला था कि मतलब इट्स हाउ इम्पोर्टेंट इट इज़ टू बी ऑनेस्ट एंड देन उसके बाद मैंने आपको बताया कि देयर आर सो मेनी बिजनेसेस व्हिच आर फ्लरिशिंग वेयर आई मीन I know for a fact that there is a lot of dishonesty which exists. So in this market, does authenticity really sell? Because अगर मैं as a businessman आ जाऊँ आपके सामने और बोल दूँ कि यार मतलब these are my strengths, but these are truly a list of weaknesses which I am working on. मतलब आप तो उसी को बैक करोगे ना जो जहाँ पे आपको दिख जाता है कि पैसा अभी मिल जाएगा, रिटर्न आ जाएगा. Because nobody is doing service to the society. I mean, eventually at the end of the day, you also have to be answerable to your LPs. So authenticity, does it actually sell?
I think it really does. Like, I truly believe in it, because authenticity is not about, not taking responsibility. It's not about saying कि जो आपको problem आ रही है आप वो सीधा, because eventually as an operator you need to have responsibility and accountability. But at the same time, I think being able to share challenges, problems, seeking help, right, in my mind allows you to actually work smartly. You're leveraging resources that are available, right? Which if you're trying to solve entirely on your own, then you're not leveraging what is available to you. So I think authenticity in my mind does sell. It's something which is very visible. I was saying earlier, the flip side, where if you're not authentic, that also people can figure out very clearly. Right? We don't give enough credit. Everyone is smart, right? I mean, nature has made us a certain way that the vibrations that happen when you speak to someone, you can make out that is this person authentic or is this person just giving, a story. And that's where I feel as investors also we need to distinguish between great storytelling and great stories. Sometimes we get enamored by great storytelling, right? Someone's come from humble background, built this great business, and we really romanticize that notion without double clicking on, is this storytelling translating into the story that it should be? And more often than not, there's a gap. The more congruent the storytelling and the story are, the better it is. But the more incongruent they are, you're essentially then backing a storyteller and not the story. That's the thing which you need to be, goes back to who you're backing, what you're backing. Who you're backing is a combination of the person and the storytelling ability. What you're backing is the real story. Right? So you need to make sure both go hand in hand. And therefore, authenticity. Like if you look at most of our leaders, CEOs, founders, I think they're very genuine, authentic people who wear their emotion on their sleeve, are very, clear on what they want, and are not insecure in any way, right? That makes a big difference.
Sure.
But like I said, it probably is one person's view, but I strongly feel about it.
Sure. So two things which will stay with me from these conversations is one is storytelling versus stories, and second is what you spoke about. I mean, for you to be vulnerable, you have to be supremely secured.
Yeah.
Usually we feel the other way around. But thanks a lot for
Thank you.
taking out time, Nishant. So much time from your busy schedule.
I really enjoyed the conversation. Like I said earlier, it goes back to the part of giving back in some ways. Hopefully, if some of this, I rewind back 25 years and I'm sitting in my hostel room listening to something, hopefully I'll get some
Yeah.
nuggets which will be helpful, right? So to some extent, I'm grateful to you, Naveen, for doing this. Thank you.
Thanks a ton. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.